Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Al's Steakhouse. I'm Richard Fredrickson, and this is a Channel 6 special. And what a delight and a privilege for being able to talk with this gentleman to my right, probably to your left, a witness to history, a World War II hero, and a Joliet resident, and a young man, I don't know, somewhere around 80 years old or so young. In that territory somewhere, maybe 90, but you know what, it doesn't make any difference because he looks like he's 55 years old, and I'm already jealous because he looks in such great shape. And your lovely wife is here. Nancy is in the background. She's going to be our executive producer, and we thank her for coming today as well. And before we begin with our guest, Daniel Ursitti, is it Ursitti or Ursitti?
Ursitti.
Ursitti, okay. And that's it's a little bit Italian? Is a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mom and Dad both were Italian.
That's great. Well, we're at Al's Steakhouse, and always I want to invite you to come here for either lunch or dinner. They're open 7 days a week, and what a delightful family-owned restaurant it is. An iconic restaurant in Joliet, known for their Sunday buffets, their Friday seafood buffets, a perfect place for your business luncheon, a great place for the family to come on Sunday after church, and a phenomenal place for your club, your organization to come and have a meeting, a talk, a seminar, and also they have opportunity for and openings for funeral luncheons as well. So it's Al's Steakhouse, the place to be. And right now it's the place to be because, can I call you Dan?
Yes, I wish you would.
Okay, Dan.
I feel more comfortable.
We're going to be comfortable here, and we're going to start out here in Joliet. You're born and raised in Joliet?
Yes.
Okay. What school did you go to?
Joliet Township.
The old JT.
That was the only school they had.
Yeah.
Now we've got a million of them.
But you know, back in those days, now you were brought up in the Depression, correct?
Yes.
That school had to be a palace.
Oh,
The way it looked, the way it was built, it still looks like a palace inside. If you haven't had an opportunity, if you drive by Joliet Central High School, you look at that huge building and you say, wow. Well, I have to tell you, the inside, the interior is just like it's brand new. It's beautiful, beautiful building, great high school. Now, for the benefit of a lot of our viewers out there who were born after the Depression era, just briefly, what was it like growing up in Joliet during the Depression?
Well, we were very lucky. My family was very lucky. My dad worked at the E.J.N.E. Railroad. He worked 7 days a week during the Depression.
Wow.
We were eating pork chops.
Wow.
And my neighbor was going down to the warehouse to get relief,
Yeah.
food.
Sure.
And I would help him push the wagon home with the bags of rice and all the relief, government relief foods. And before we could bring the food into the house, the mother would say, leave the food out there because we got to get all the bugs out of it.
Oh, yeah.
So before he could bring it in, before we could cook them. It was terrible. Of course, my family, we were lucky. But it was very tough. I mean, it wasn't like it is today. No green cards.
Yeah. No.
None of that kind of stuff.
When you were poor, Depression, it was what we really call poor. There was no televisions and no cars driving and any of that. It was what they have rationing, didn't they also have that? Oh, that
Yeah.
began during the war, the rationing.
We
right?
didn't have radios. We had little crystal sets.
Little crystal sets. Oh, wow. If you still had that crystal set,
I wish I did. I wish I
it'd
did.
be worth a few bucks, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We're talking with Dan Ursitti because of his stories, sharing with us about World War II. We have done shows and we have interviewed World War II veterans.
Excuse me.
Most of those fellas were up in the air. We've talked with the what was it, Dick? B-24, B-17 pilots, co-pilots, bombardiers, gunners. Out at the Aurora Municipal Airport and out at the Lewis Airport over the years, and we've had the privilege, I don't know if you've ever been on one of these, but have you ever been on an honor flight?
Yes.
You know, that's, every time I even think of that, I get emotional about the honor flights leaving Midway Airport. And if you're a veteran, if you have a veteran from World War II, now I believe Korea as well, contact, I don't know who you contact. Contact your VFW, your American Legion post, and they probably have information on that.
Sure.
Dan, when you left school at, about 17 or 18 years old?
Yeah, I was 16 maybe.
Okay.
And I dropped out of JT to go to a CC camp. We had the Roosevelt came up with the CC camps.
And that was Civilian Conservation?
Civilian Conservation Corps. And I was in Oregon, chopping trees.
How was that? From a city boy, now you're in Oregon. Now you're out in the woods. What was that like?
Oh, it was a big experience.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Oh, it was like in another world. But it was good. We had Army clothes. We had Army food. We slept in Army little barracks.
Mm-hmm.
It was like being in the Army, but you weren't in the Army. We had civilian men as foremen taking us out on the projects. And it was a great experience. You could only register, you could only sign up for 6 months at a time.
Huh.
Then you had to come out and go back for another 6 months. But the pay was, well, we got $6 a month and the rest went home. We got $1 a day.
Yeah.
You got $30 a month.
Ah.
They gave you 6 and the rest went home. Made sure that the family was being taken care of.
That was a great plan. I didn't know
Oh,
the
great
financial
plan.
end of that. Yeah.
Great plan.
What'd you
great
do with
plan.
the $6, Dan?
I was smoking then.
Lucky Strikes and
Cigarette- Lucky
Chesterfield,
Strikes,
Palm Out.
Chesterfield.
Yeah. Sure.
And we'd go to town and we'd go to the little pub
Yeah.
in town and have a couple of beers maybe, you know.
And you're 17 or 18 years old. Right?
At that time you could get away with it
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's,
because we behaved ourselves.
yeah, there you go. We'll stay with that story.
Yeah.
Now, somewhere along the line, you get a job at the EJ&E Railroad
Yeah.
before you go into the Army, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So now what are you doing with the EJ&E Railroad? What are you doing there?
I was a hostler helper, which at that time we were transporting war materials, so I could have got a deferment.
Oh.
But I says, no, I don't want a deferment.
Now, was this at the yards on the east side, the same
Yes,
yards?
the East Side Yards.
Okay.
And no, I said, I want to wear the uniform. I want to go in with the boys, which I did.
So what year did you go in?
42.
42. Okay. Because you get out at 45, so you're there in 42.
Mhm.
Now, what was it like? What was basic training like? And where did you have basic training? Someplace nice?
Alabama. Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Okay. We love you if you're from Alabama. Wonderful. But it was probably a little challenging back in those days.
Was it? We went to town and the girls wouldn't dance with us because we were rebels.
You were Yankees.
We were Yankees.
You were Yankees.
The rebels wouldn't dance with the
Yeah.
Yankees.
Ah,
But anyway,
yeah.
after a while, they found out that we could jitterbug,
Ah.
so then they started dancing with us.
Oh. Now, when you went to boot camp, what did that consist of in those days?
Well, it was rifle range. They taught you the basic functions of the Army: how to march, how to walk, how to stand, how to military discipline was a great thing. You had to respect your superiors. And we did some rifle range. We did some hand grenade throwing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To kind of get you used to being in the military.
Yeah. So, the guys who you were with in boot camp, were most of those, or some of those, or a few of those also go with you when you head off to Europe?
Yes, yes. We almost stayed together till we got to Fort Meade, Maryland.
Ah.
And at that time, I was trained as a radio operator.
Was that
Well-
something you wanted to do, or they just tell you that's what you
Well,
wanted to
that's
do?
what I was qualified for. I guess they qualify you. The Army does that. They do a good job. So they qualified me as a radio operator, And coming under radio operation, that comes under communication. So bugling comes under communication.
Really?
So they made me a bugler.
Now, had you taken music lessons prior to that? Or?
Well, yeah, you went out in the woods and you practiced how to do all the calls.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so at Fort Meade, Maryland, I did some bugling there. I woke the boys up and I put them to sleep at night.
Yeah. Well, at night they probably were popular. In the morning you were not so popular.
Not so popular in the morning, but it was great fun. It was a nice experience because we were preparing ourselves to go overseas.
Right.
So we went to Fort Dix, where we got on at that time the Queen Elizabeth English luxury ship was converted into a troop ship. It could carry 1,500 troops. So I went overseas on the Queen Elizabeth.
And what was that experience like? Did you have dinner served in your cabin and then shuffleboard on
No, you
on the
stayed
top
in line.
deck?
You stayed in line in the chow line like everybody else.
Yeah.
And it was a nice experience. And because they said we're zigzagging because of the fear of German submarines
Sure. Yeah.
lining us up. So they zigzagged, and we landed at Glasgow, Scotland. From Glasgow, Scotland, we went to England, where we did some more extensive training.
So you really had a lot of training. You're talking about McKellen, and then you're going to before you go to Fort Meade, you were at.
We did some more training in
So
England.
now in England, you're training some more. Now, aside from bugling, now you're a radio operator.
Yes.
Does that mean you know Morse code and all that kind of stuff, or
No Morse code, no.
no?
We
So
didn't.
you're hauling these huge things on your back, that radio that I've seen photos of.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Wow.
Where was I?
You got more training in Great Britain, England, and I want to make sure because you'll have veterans watching this as well.
Right.
What company were you with? Brigade? What was it? You said the 79th Infantry?
79 Infantry, 313th Battalion.
Okay.
I was in the service squad because I was a radio operator.
Right.
You weren't in a platoon where you had what am I trying to say? The platoons were made up of 4 squads made a platoon.
Mm-hmm.
4 platoons made a company. 4 companies made a battalion. 3 battalions made a division. Okay?
Gotcha. But now, where does a radio operator? How many in a division or a battalion? How many radio operators would be involved in that?
There was 2 of us, 2
Okay.
radio operators,
Wow.
with like a backup,
Yeah.
in case one got knocked off.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Uh,
I would think if they saw you coming, the enemy would want to get you first. For communications, they would probably want to take you out.
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, we were a target, and but we had medics who wore the helmet with the
The cross on it.
cross
Yeah.
on, and as far as I know, the enemy did respect the medics.
Well, they did,
Yes, it was.
but not you.
Oh no.
Not the radio guys. Yeah. Now, when did you get you? I'm looking here at my notes. Before D-Day +3, were you training all the way up to that period of time?
Yes.
Okay.
We were learning how to climb down the rope ladders and
Yeah.
to come off a ship
Yeah.
and make a landing, get on the ground.
Was there a lot of anxiety? You probably watched The Longest Day. which is a great, well-produced war movie. There was so many days that they would call it off because of weather, etc. On D-Day +3, first of all, I guess you should maybe tell the folks what that means. D-Day +3.
Well, yeah. 3 days after D-Day.
Right, yeah.
The beaches were pretty well secured by the time the 79.
Yeah. The beaches were secure.
The beaches were secured, pretty well secured.
Yeah, but then beyond the beaches, that was something else.
Oh, yeah.
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 Hedgegroves.
They were starting to bury the dead already.
Yeah.
And I saw that burial ground at Normandy. It's huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, I don't know how many thousands of boys were killed and wounded in that D-Day. You wonder, somehow, some way, if there was no other way to do it except that way. Eisenhower had to make that decision.
Eisenhower was a great president. He was a good golfer too.
Yeah, he played as much golf as our current president does. The hedgegroves, when you're beyond the beach, because D-Day was D-Day, but there was a lot of years to go after D-Day, and a lot of battles and combat. The 79th Infantry that you were a part of. Tell me a little bit now, as you're going to the hedgegrove, before you get to Paris, before you go through there, what was that like?
Well, we hit, there's a city, a little village called St. Lo. We took St. Lo, and then we had to, the enemy attacked us, and we had to retreat. But at that time, we didn't say the U.S. Army ever retreated. It was a strategic withdrawal. Okay. So we withdrew, and then we retook St. Lo. The second time we took St. Lo wasn't much of a city. It was pretty well leveled with the artillery and the bombing.
Yeah, your B-24 bombers coming through just ahead of you, because you were kind of, if I remember the article I read about you and the history of the 79th, you were pinned down pretty a lot by those hedgegroves and the Germans up giving a high ground, and you're trying to go forward.
Sure, we could hear the enemy talking at the next hedgerow.
Oh my God!
During the night, we could hear them talking. Yeah. That's how close they were. But they were. I don't know, 6-8 feet wide.
Yeah.
And our 50 calibers couldn't even penetrate them. But that was a big experience.
So, are you, let's see, I'm trying to, one of the things you mentioned to me, it was probably going to be out of context. I'm going to bleep in all over the place here, I guess. But just before our interview here, you mentioned the new Joliet rabbi. And what's his name? You told me his name.
Charles Rebovitz.
Rabbi Rebovitz. They had you come or talk or share some information because the 79th liberated a labor camp?
Yes, in France.
In France?
Yes.
Was it after Paris or before Paris?
Oh, it was after Paris, way east of Paris, almost near the German border.
When you're in Paris, and I found it interesting, I had forgotten this. I really did. I knew from history that the Germans and the Nazis loved the arts, the Louvre, and loved Paris. It was very special to them. They took good care of it while they occupied it in terms of building and art, not necessarily the people. But when you got to Paris, there was a designation of that city. What was it? So that there was no, when you marched into Paris, was there any sign of battle? Was there any sign of destruction?
No.
Why was that?
I don't know. It was declared an open city because of its history, I guess. They had the painted windows at the Notre Dame Cathedral stored in the metro. What the metro is the
subway.
Subway. They had the windows taken down from the cathedral, stored in the subway to protect them in case there was a misfire or somebody.
Yeah, well, a concussion would take those windows out. Or
Well, in case somebody, you know, had a trigger finger and started shooting.
So it's an open city. Once you get to Paris, militarily there isn't any resistance, yet you did take on some
Sniper
snipers.
fire.
And this is kind of an interesting story that I had never heard. I knew about these women who, you know, had
Liberators.
the Germans.
Sympathizers.
Yeah, sympathizers. I knew what happened to them, but I did not realize that they actually were, some of them were snipers.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it didn't last very long. You know, it didn't last very long because the village people would get these snipers. They would get them right immediately, bring them down into the streets and shave their heads off to embarrass them, and that was their punishment.
And I think they think they got kicked out of their apartments, and their families had to move on out of there too.
Oh, sure.
And the people who were shaving their heads were other women.
Well, men and women. You
But
know,
the women took part in that too.
civilians.
Yeah. So, probably had a good time in Paris.
Yeah, then I went back to Paris after when the war ended, and during peacetime. I was in Paris during peacetime.
And what was that like?
That was very good. The nightclubs were very active. Champs-Élysées, that's the main street, the Champs-Élysées. Well, all nightclubs, drinking, partying. It was a big fun thing.
Yeah. It's I know Aurora claims this, Aurora, Illinois claims it, but Paris was the first city, the city of lights. And evidently it was. When did you go back?
Well, see, when the war ended, a lot of the GIs went home on part system, on point system.
Right.
Well, I didn't have enough points to go home, so.
Is that because you were a single guy?
Because I was a single guy, I didn't have enough points. I had some combat time with points, and they rated your points on combat time, any merit, any valors that badges that you might have acquired. So I didn't have enough points to come home. So anyway, I re-enlisted. They gave you a choice if you wanted to re-enlist for 18 months instead of a hitch, which was 3 years.
Right.
You could enlist for 18 months. So I took that opportunity, and I stayed in Germany for another year during peacetime. That was good times.
Yeah. Give me a little bit of that experience, and we're going to go travel from that. We're going to go into the Battle of the Bulge. What was that like? The experience in Paris now, while you're there.
Yeah.
In wartime. I mean, after the war.
Yeah.
And what was that like as a
Like
United
we say, it
States
was
soldier?
a big party time.
Was it?
Yeah, the nightclubs were going swinging, and the shows were swinging. It was just fun time. It was a celebration time. Celebrate.
Was the reaction and response from the French people, were they thankful for the American forces at that time?
Yes. Yes. They were very kind to us, willing to, they were open, they were very friendly, very, very friendly. I would say the French and the Germans treated us very friendly after the war.
The German civilians.
The German civilians.
What about did you come in any contact with the British soldiers or the Russians while you were there? And how was that experience?
Not so much. The Russians liked the American cigarettes. They'd do anything to give for you to give it. They would trade their Russian cigarettes for our American cigarettes, which the Russian cigarettes weren't as good as a Lucky Strike.
Where in the world would the Russians get tobacco? They didn't have Cuba at the time. I know that. I wonder where they got their tobacco.
I don't know.
The Battle of the Bulge, we've read about history in school, we've seen documentaries on it, but I've never talked with anyone who was actually in it. So give me a little bit of the experience of what took place. First of all, for those watching, What did that mean when you say the Battle of the Bulge? What does that mean?
Okay. We had some of the greatest generals and army officials that ever lived. They always maintained a straight front line. From northern France to southern France, it was always a straight line. No unit ever went ahead of the other one. If one was being held up for some reason or other, that they were hitting some problems and they were delayed a little bit, we would wait for that unit to catch up. And we always maintained a straight line. Well, when the Germans decided, I guess they decided, their generals decided, let's make one big effort to get the Americans.
Yeah.
So they pushed on all fronts. They attacked us on all fronts. We were way in southern France. 79th was with the 9th Army in southern France. There were armies north who also felt the impact of the attack. But the weak spot was in Belgium. If you can visualize the map, France, Belgium is about the center point from France. That was the weak spot. They found a weak spot, and that was the breakthrough. They broke through our line.
So the bulge.
That was the bulge.
Okay.
That was the bulge. They were heading back for Normandy. They were chasing us back to Normandy. They were going to run us back into the English Channel. They were going to send us back to America.
They had their armored divisions were there. The 9th Army, by the way, who was the general of the 9th Army?
Oh, God.
That wasn't Patton, was it?
No. Patton moved from army to army, and that was for military strategy purposes. They moved us from army to army. We would be in the 9th Army. The next time we'd probably be in the 4th Army.
Gotcha.
That was military strategy.
Just maneuvering back and forth.
Maneuvering back. Yeah. In case you got captured, the enemy would be confused. Well, you were in the 9th Army yesterday. Today you're in the 12th Army. Yeah. What is it? You know, it was a military strategy.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the breakthrough was in Belgium. Well, we were in southern France, and the armies in northern France were British, French, American, same way at the southern part. So that was right around just before Christmas in December. I can remember Christmas was coming. And we were ordered to attack north. And the northern armies were ordered to attack south. So we pinched off that bulge. We pinched off their supply lines. They were starving. They couldn't get gasoline to their tanks. We actually disabled the entire German army. I saw divisions, army divisions, led by their captains and their officers in complete surrender because they were starving.
Yeah.
And they knew the end of the war was close. And that was pretty much an indication that the war, the German was pretty well weakening, their armies were weakening, and it looked pretty much like the end of the war was coming.
What was it like as a radio man, and you heard the first transmission, Hitler is dead,
Yes.
Hitler is dead?
Yes.
Did you not hear that?
Pardon?
On your radio, was that not something you heard? Did they give you that message?
Well, yes, sure. It was announced
Yeah.
like here, your radio would announce Odekerk is our new mayor.
There you go. Okay. All right.
But anyway, that we were stationed, or the 79th was about 3 miles out of Berlin. We were told to dig in, hold our position, because the British Army, the French Army, the Russian Army, the French, all armies were going to go into Berlin all simultaneously together. So nobody could claim that they were the winners of the. It was it was military strategy.
A little politics there too. I
Little
think.
politics there.
Too.
The guys with the brass
Yeah.
went into Berlin.
Because there was no love between Monty, Montgomery, Patton, and a few other generals and the Russians
Yes.
at that time. It's so interesting. Again, if you have children or grandchildren watching this, that the Russians were indeed allies of ours.
Yes.
And it was shortly after that, for decades, they were involved in what we call the Cold War. That's for a different show and a different time. So you're now all the war is done. You're in Paris having 18 months of reassignment. What were you thinking about? You're 2 weeks away, and you're about to go back to the States. What are you thinking about?
I really don't know.
You're thinking about going back to the J? You're thinking about coming back to Joliet? Obviously family and coming back home.
Yeah, the family and yeah, I went back to the DJ&E.
Oh, you did?
Oh, they guaranteed
Yeah.
my job.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
When I left, your job will be here if you come back.
Ah,
And I went right back to my very same job. And maybe 2 or 3 months,
Mhm.
I decided, no, I don't want to do this. So I decided to go to barber school
yeah.
under the GI Bill.
I read that. Now, why the barber school? Why? Was there someone in your family who was a barber? Was there a friend who was a barber? Why?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Yeah.
You had a choice. You either go to the shoemaker school, or you could go to a floral school, or you could go to a barber school. So of the three, I picked the barber school.
I think there's two nationalities that come to mind who are barbers. Number one, Italians. You know, you got Frank Benito here in Joliet,
Oh yeah.
and you, and then you've got the Giranis,
Yes.
the more Italians, but then you've got a bunch of Irish barbers as well out there. So, how many years? We'll leap ahead here a little bit. How many years have you been barbering? Is that the right
Oh.
word, barbering?
Since
Cutting hair.
since 1949.
Now, you don't still do that, do you?
Yeah, I do. I have some old friends of mine that are handicapped.
Mhm.
One of my friends is in a wheelchair. He can't get to a barber shop. He calls me when he needs a haircut, and I go to his house and I cut his hair for him.
Do you do any work with the hospice at all? With those
No.
folks? No? That's an interesting possibility there.
Yes.
I have to ask you this, okay? Because I happen to know, because way back I used to watch Barney and the sheriff, you know, and the whole time, all the gossip and all the talk ends up or starts at the barber shop. Did you have any of that at your barber shop? Here in Joliet, you find out things in the barber shop. The guys tell you stuff. I know there was no betting going on at the barber shop. I know that part, and I know there's no betting going on. But were there any kind of tips that would take
Well,
place?
I have to disagree with you on that betting. I'm going to interrupt you on that one.
Now, wait a minute now. Before you say anything, what is the term on, you can't get him. It's over with. It's done. Okay. Now go ahead.
When I first opened my barber shop on Collins Street, a guy pulled up one day in a big Cadillac, three-piece suit. He wanted to shave. He said, "Do you do shaves?" I said, "Yes." "Yes, sir." I shaved him, and he said, "Say, would you like to make a little extra money?" Well, everybody wants to make a little extra money.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
He says, "Well," he said, "this is a good place for a little bookie. Would you like to run a little bookie?" At that time, I was interested.
Of
Sure.
course.
Why not? He says, we'll bring you the scratch sheet every morning. You run the bookie. We'll put you on a 25%,
Oh,
which wasn't too bad.
yeah.
And guaranteed if you get busted, just go along with them, go to the police station, here's a phone number. Call this phone number, we'll have you out in an hour.
Well, there you go.
So there was a little hanky-panky going on. I did that until my wife found out.
Oh, she found out, did she?
Somebody told my wife, says, Dan is ready to look. Well, when I came home that night, she said, you quit that because your kids are in danger. If you come up $1 short, your kids are going to have to pay for it. Stop it right now.
Yeah. That's when that word,
So I did
that's
that.
the first time the word was used, put the kibosh on that. I'm kidding.
Yeah, we put the kibosh
Put the
on it.
kibosh on that. College Street. What's College Street like back in the days when you had your barber shop?
Oh, it was all businesses, all good business. Grant's Hardware was there.
The original Grant's Hardware store.
The original Grant's Hardware.
And Grab-A-Boy Hardware.
Grant himself was
Yeah.
running the store
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
Grant and his son
Yeah.
was
Sonny.
run.
Was that Sonny?
Sonny,
Yeah.
you remember Sonny?
Yeah, I remember Sonny. Yes, I do.
I guess everybody remembers Sonny.
That's for another show. That's for another
That's
show.
another show.
The College Street was a business district. It was
Yes.
a very
Saloon, the
Yeah.
Alligator
Yeah.
Inn,
yeah. There were a few taverns on College Street.
Roof Tavern.
Yeah,
That was
Roof-
Whiskey Row.
Yeah, because Joliet, you know what we had. Well, obviously, a little bit later on we had Caterpillar, but U.S. Steel was there,
Yes.
and the yards were there. I mean, it was a working man's blue collar town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they all had to get their hair cut, right?
Yeah. 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 We did a good business.
And you raised a family. We ought to talk about that right now. Tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, my daughter, at the age of 30, had a very serious disease, a very rare disease called vasculitis.
Mm-hmm.
She passed away. But my son is still with us. He works for NetJets,
NetJets.
which is a private airline. In fact, he flies Tiger Woods.
Well, then he'd be working this weekend then, because Tiger's at the
No,
Masters.
my son had some shoulder surgery,
Oh,
and he's home. He's recuperating. So
so he flies personalities around?
he flies personalities.
Great.
Of course, when he flies Tiger Woods, they're not using company airplanes. They're using Tiger's airplane.
Ah.
He has his own airplane, his own
Of course, of course.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, that had to be that's kind of a neat thing. Next time we put your son on the list, we'd like to talk with him.
Yeah.
He probably has a story, unless you can't tell. I don't know.
Well,
if they
he
make him
lives in
sign.
Georgia now.
Well, we'll have Schuster, he just flies me down those places.
Schuster?
Yeah, Dick and Millie, they've got their own transportation. It's a Jeep with the plow on it out there.
Boy, he came a long way from being a plumber.
He certainly has. A great guy. He was the one who said, you've got to have Dan on this show because he's an interesting man, and sharing, your personal life with the folks about World War II and the 79th. And one of the things we want to highlight and showcase right now, because she's the executive producer of this show, and that's your wife. Tell me a little bit about your wife, aside from putting the kibosh on that bookie thing at the barber shop on Collins Street. Where'd you meet her? When did you meet her?
Well, I was cutting hair down in Joliet on Jefferson Street for John Micklick, and she worked for the Herald News.
Ah.
So she was catching the bus. That was the bus stop right near the barber shop. So she was catching the bus one day, and I was standing in the window, and she winked at me.
Oh, yeah, those
That
women.
captured my heart.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
I
every
loved
time.
her. I've been in love with her ever since.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's been a delight talking with you. We want to wish you the best, and I know that you're proud of your country, and I also know that you have great support for our men and women in uniform today as well.
Oh, I salute them. I think we can never do enough for these kids that are in there today. These boys they're not boys, they're men. They're real men to be in there. And I have a lot of respect for them. When I see a man in uniform, I salute him. He's got my salute.
We salute you and those who served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Middle East, and let's hope and pray that we can, in the future years, be done with those kinds of things. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Dan.
Yes.
Dan Ursitti.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
Great guy, great stories, and I hope you've enjoyed our stay here at Al's Steakhouse with
That was
Dan
wonderful.
Ursitti. I'm Richard Fredrickson. We'll see you next time.